Today, we will be covering Prepare for Data Collection, which is task list item A1, and we will review task list item A6, Describe Behavior and Environment in Observable and Measurable Terms. This training program is based on the RBT task list and is designed to meet the 40-hour training requirement for RBT certification. The program is offered independent of the BACB. Today's agenda includes preparing for data collection. This will cover the necessary steps to prepare for data collection. Describe behavior. This will take a look at why good definitions are necessary and what constitutes as a good definition and poor definition, and finish with a recap of what was covered today. First, we will cover preparing for data collection. One might wonder why we collect data. There are several reasons why data collection is important to behavior analysts. Without collecting data, there are several mistakes that can be made, such as we may continue an intervention that is ineffective when no real behavior change has occurred. Without data collection, we will not be able to see the visual representation on a graph that can show us trend lines. For skill acquisition, we would want to see an increasing trend, and with behavior reduction, we would want to see a decreasing trend. However, with no data, we will not be able to make these data-based decisions. We may also discontinue an effective treatment because subjective judgment detects no improvement. For example, a teacher may not be able to distinguish the difference between a student reading at 80 words per minute versus a student reading at 90 words per minute, and then stop an intervention even though there is improvement. Direct measurement, therefore, allows us to detect successes and failures, then make changes as necessary. So why is good data collection important? Accurate data collection allows behavior analysts to make those data-based decisions. So what do we mean by accurate? An accurate measurement is one where the value that is yielded reflects the true value of the behavioral dimension under consideration. So the more accurate data collection is, the more beneficial changes will be when we make them. For example, if a client's true value of correct responding is 70%, but a technician incorrectly takes the data as 90% correct, then the client may be moved to a different phase when they are not ready. This can hinder future learning. Now let's discuss how preparing for data collection can help. By preparing for data collection, you're making it more likely that your collection methods will yield more accurate results. Preparation will make it easier for you to take data while attending to the client. For example, if you don't prepare for data collection prior to beginning session with the child, you may be doing so when the child is engaging in behaviors that you should be attending to and taking data on. This will lead to missed data on those behaviors. Now we will be going over 6 steps to help you prepare for data collection. Step 1. Determine what behavior you are taking data on. For behavior reduction, you can do this by looking at the functional behavior assessment or the behavior intervention plan for an operational definition. Operational definitions make it possible for 2 or more independent observers to identify the same behavior when observed. For skill acquisition, you can look at the skill acquisition plan for what target behaviors you will be working on. Step 2. Determine the best type of data to take on the behavior. For behavior reduction, this should be outlined in the functional behavior assessment or behavior intervention plan. For example, you may be using partial interval data, rate, frequency, or others. For skill acquisition, this will be listed in the skill acquisition plan. Again, you should determine what type of data collection is needed. If you are unsure, you should be consulting with your supervisor. Step 3. Once you've identified what data collection method you will be using, you should gather all necessary materials. This could include a clipboard, pen, timer, datasheet, etc. if you're using paper data. Or, if applicable, you may be using electronic data. So you may need a tablet, phone, computer, or whatever electronic method you're using, as well as the application. Step 4. Now that you've gathered the necessary materials, you should fill out identifying information on the top of your datasheet or in the application. This could include the child's name, the date, time, target behaviors, your initials, etc. Specifically for using electronic methods, you should sign into the application, pull up the correct child's information, and get any timers or intervals ready. Step 5. You should take all necessary measures to eliminate distractions. With data collection, the focus should always be on the client as well as the data collection process. This will make data collection results accurate as possible. Step 6. You are now fully prepared for data collection and you are now ready. As a reminder, keep your eyes on the client at all times to ensure you're getting accurate measures of all target behaviors. Question. Preparing for data collection can help increase which of the following? A. Reliability. B. Accuracy. C. Inner response time. Or D. Validity. On your homework sheet, fill in the question, preparing for data collection can help increase which of the following? I'll give you some time to get that question filled in. The answer to the previous question was B, accuracy. By preparing for data collection, this allows you more time to focus on collecting the data and observing the client. This will then result in a more accurate measure of behaviors. On your homework sheet, fill in the answer B, accuracy. I'll give you some time to get that answer filled in. Question. Which of the following is not a step for preparing for data collection? A. Gather materials. B. Eliminate distractions. C. Write objective definitions of behavior. Or D. Determine the best data collection method. On your homework sheet, fill in the question, which of the following is not a step for preparing for data collection? I'll give you some time to get that question filled in. The answer to the previous question was C, write objective definitions of behavior. These should be already written by your BCBA and listed in either the Behavior Intervention Plan or the Skill Acquisition Plan. If you are ever unsure of what the target behavior is or what constitutes as the target behavior, make sure to ask your supervisor. On your homework sheet, fill in the answer C. Write objective definitions of behavior. I'll give you some time to get that answer filled in. We will now be moving on to the topic of describe behavior and environment in observable and measurable terms. Before we begin, we will be watching a short clip.
Today we're going to be talking about task number I-01 of the current 4th edition BACB task list. The BACB has identified defining behavior in observable and measurable terms as something clinicians in behavior analysis should be familiar with. Why is this important? Our job as behavior analysts is to improve socially significant behaviors. Cooper and colleagues state that the validity of scientific knowledge in its most basic form implies replication. If we aren't clear about exactly what we're measuring, we're going to have a pretty difficult time replicating it, tracking it, and convincing others that our interventions are effective. Have you ever been in a situation where you or your team assumed you all understood the behavior you were collecting data on? Let's take this example. A teacher expresses frustration with her students calling out and wants to see more hands raised before shouting out answers. Easy, right? You and your colleague go into her classroom for a couple of observations and collect some initial baseline data for raising hands. Back at the office, you review your data with each other and notice some pretty big discrepancies between your data and hers. It sounds like a case of poorly defined behaviors. You and your colleague clarify your definition and agree that raising hands is defined as any instance in which a child puts their hand in the air during instruction. For purposes of this example, let's pretend that you are reviewing tapes from the initial observation. After comparing the data from your second go at it, you and your colleague are still having trouble agreeing on the occurrences of hand raising. For example, your colleague tallied when little Joey raised his hand, but you did not because Joey yelled out the answer before the teacher called his name. So who's correct? Well, at this point, neither of you, because you still haven't defined hand raising operationally. Before we even think about developing an intervention, we've got to get on the same page for how we're going to measure it. It's time for a major definition cleanup. Let's review how to operationally define a behavior. Operational definitions are important not just for behavior analysis, but for any science. They increase accuracy, program effectiveness, and the ability for the practitioner to apply procedures consistently and fluently. When we're clear about the occurrence and non-occurrence of a target behavior, we're able to develop and monitor interventions that make meaningful changes in our clients' lives. So where do we start? First things first, let's remember the good old dead man's test. If a dead man can do it, it's not behavior. If a dead man cannot do it, then it is behavior. It's safe to say that a dead man is not able to raise his hand, but we can use this rule of thumb throughout the entire operational definition process. A few things to keep in mind when developing an operational definition for a target behavior. Your detailed definition must be 1. Clear and concise. Get straight to the point. Your definition should be easy to understand. You want your reader to become fluent with this definition. It should be able to give a lot of information with just a few words. 2. Objective. Your definition needs to represent observable and measurable events and be free of any personal opinions or feelings. And 3. Complete. Your definition should describe boundaries for what is and what is not included, reducing the need for any judgment calls. With these 3 tips in mind, we must also consider the functional implications of the behavior's effect on the environment. So in this case, what is the purpose of calling out? Is it to share the answer? Is it to ask for help or access the bathroom? Is it to make a joke to make peers laugh? This may require some further analysis. And the topographical implications. What's the behavior's shape or form? What does it look like? Does hand raising occur as a single instance, or does it occur for an extended duration of time? Does it include making vocalizations? And if a behavior is not listed in the operational definition, it can't be scored as an occurrence. Finally, remember that definitions should be individualized. For example, a greeting for one student might be a verbal, "Hey, how's it going?" and maybe just eye contact and a smile for another student. There are lots of questions to be asked when defining dependent variables, even the behaviors we consider to be simple. But the more detailed our definitions are, the greater chance we have for inter-observer agreement and ultimately developing a successful intervention. Let's give our hand-raising definition another try. Hand-raising in class is defined as any instance in which a student extends her arms straight above her head without a bend in the elbow towards the ceiling with fingers extended in an open palm until her name is called, or up to a duration of 10 seconds without making any vocalizations. One last tip, if you're fortunate enough to be working with a team, recruit someone to test your definition before applying it. It'll save you some time by identifying any confusion or discrepancies ahead of time, and it will allow you to be more effective in measuring the behavior and make meaningful, lasting changes. We'd like to hear from you. What did you think of this definition? Do you think you and your colleague may be able to get more inter-observer agreement of occurrence and non-occurrence of hand raising? What behaviors would be scored? Which ones wouldn't? Give it a test run and let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.
So what is the importance of defining behaviors? This allows everyone involved to identify the same behavior. By having a good operational definition, this will increase the accuracy in identifying the behavior, which increased accuracy will then lead to better treatment fidelity. Now let's take a look at some of the measurable dimensions of behavior. First, we have repeatability. Instances of a behavior can occur repeatedly through time. Frequency and rate are examples of this. Next, we have temporal extent. So every instance of a behavior occurs during some amount of time. What this means is that the duration of the behavior can be measured. So duration per occurrence, and duration per session are examples of this. And last, we have temporal locus. Every instance of behavior occurs at a certain point in time with respect to other events. This means that when the behavior occurs can be measured. Latency and inter-response times are measures of this. Derivative measures can be obtained from these measures, such as percentage and trials to criterion. There are also two definitional measures of behavior. First, we have topography, which is the physical form or shape of a behavior. And we also have magnitude, which is the force or intensity of a response. There are two things we want to define when taking data. First is the behavior. This is the portion of an organism's interaction with its environment that involves movement of some part of the organism. Keep in mind the dead man test. If a dead man can do it, then it is not behavior. The second thing we are defining is the environment. This is defined as the conglomerate of real circumstances in which the organism or references part of the organism exist. Behavior cannot occur in the absence of environment. There are three characteristics of good target behavior definitions. First, definitions should be objective, meaning they should refer to only to observable characteristics of behavior and the environment if needed, or translating any inferential terms such as expressing hostile feelings, intended to help, or showing interest in, into more objective ones. Second, definitions should be clear, meaning they should be readable and unambiguous. This is so that experienced observers could read it and readily paraphrase it accurately. Last, definitions should be complete. They should be delineating the boundaries of what is to be included as an instance of the response and what is to be excluded, thereby directing the observers in all situations that are likely to occur and leaving little to their judgment. Morris suggests 3 questions that you can use to test your definitions. First, can you count the number of times the behavior occurs in a specific time period? Or can you count the number of minutes that it takes for the child to perform the behavior? That is, you can tell someone that the behavior occurred X number of times or X number of minutes today. Your answer to this question should be yes. Second, will a stranger know exactly what to look for when you tell him or her the target behavior? That is, can you actually see the child performing the behavior when it occurs? Again, your answer to this question should be yes. And last, can you break down the target behavior into smaller components, each of which is more specific and observable than the original target behavior? Your answer to this question should be no. Now we will watch a video that will help us identify poorly written behaviors and how to make them more acceptable.
Before we can change student behavior, we need to define that behavior. In fact, defining behavior is the first step in supporting student behavior. Now, some people may say, why take the time to define behavior? But it's vital to define behavior in clearly observable terms in order to measure progress. So what do I mean by observable? Well, observable behaviors can be seen. It might help you to imagine the observer as a camera. Other behaviors are more easily heard, and so imagine them as being recorded by a tape recorder. In both cases, the recording device is unable to give a subjective opinion about the behavior. Good observers know this. They don't give their opinions, they just record the facts. So let's look at some examples. Off task isn't really observable until we add crawls on floor, taps pencil, or plays with objects in desk. Then we know that this woman is off task. Making our descriptions measurable allows us to count and quantify, which makes it much easier to figure out if our strategies are working. This is particularly important as we're working as part of a team to control and change behavior. Phrases like disrupts other students' learning become measurable when we add descriptors like tapping neighbors on shoulders, grabbing peers' materials, doodles on neighbor's paper, or whispers to neighbor. Phrases like uses profanity become measurable when we add uses words referencing toileting, or referencing sex, or referencing deity. Operational definitions. Andrew wanders around is not operational. Andrew leaves his assigned seat during instruction without permission is operational and can be seen and recorded by various separate observers. What is the frequency, duration, and/or intensity of the behavior? Frequency refers to the number of times a behavior occurs. Many times I've heard teachers say, he's always out of his seat. And yet when we conduct an observation, we discover he's only out of his seat 3 or 4 times. Maybe too many times for that teacher, but the actual number will help us track the student's improvement. Duration refers to the length of time a behavior occurs. There's a very big difference between a 5-second behavior and a 2-minute behavior. Intensity is a little more difficult to measure, and so creating an assigned numerical scale may help quantify it. If you've been to the doctor or urgent care recently, you may have been asked to rate your pain intensity on a scale from 1 to 10. Communicating a number helps caregivers determine how soon and how much help you need. So how do we keep track of all of this behavior? You guessed it, we use data.
Question: what are the 3 characteristics of a well-defined target behavior? I'll give you some time to get this question filled out on your homework sheet. The answer to the previous question is objective, clear, and complete. I'll now give you some time to get that answer filled in on your homework sheet. The main focus of today's lesson is the importance of increasing accuracy. Preparing for data collection will yield more accurate data, and also having clearly defined behaviors leads to more accurate data collection. This concludes today's lesson on task list item A1, prepare for data collection, and the review of task list item A6, describe behavior and environment in observable and measurable terms. You may now take the quiz.